folding man. I knew I was special in elementary school when the children would marvel as I interlaced my fingers in front of me and brought my arms back entirely behind my body without releasing them. The snickering was always hushed by the oohs and ahs. I had the crowd wrapped around my little finger, and I was soon collecting lunch money and bets as I realized my talent was marketable as a career. As I grew older and watched the big acts, Barnum, Cirque, and other troupes, I realized I needed to step up my routine in order to flourish. As school was ending, my auditions to the big leagues were tainted by the sourness of repeated rejection. I studied new stretches and learned to dislocate my femur and even my jaw in order to get a sharper edge on the competition. I learned backbending and in time was able to sit on my head, with my back arched in such a sharp fold that my peers in competition paled while watching with squeamish unease. Still, only the odd freak show seemed interested, and while they earned a modest living, I knew I had more skill in my lumbar discs than these hacks had in their entire body. Then I discovered enterology. Enterology is the art of folding oneself into compact spaces, such as a box, which appears too small to possibly enter. All the major circuses hired box-packing performers, so I stretched my ligaments and tendons, loosened my cartilage, and tested the limits pain could infringe. And before long, my act was in the top 5%. When I mastered the craft and auditioned once again, I grinned uncontrollably at the response from the judges. I watched their jaws drop as my frame burned and my joints screamed from inside that small plexiglass box, knowing just how close to death I truly was. My smile drooled a strand of saliva as the judges stood slowly and clapped, their faces saying it all. They had seen a masterpiece. I was hooked on the reaction I had elicited, and I knew I could push it even further, but not without permanent consequence. I built a device, complete with hydraulic pistons, to make the ultimate fold possible. I knew my act needed no middleman if I displayed the truly impossible, and that's why I put up the ads for assistance. The act I'm showing has the crowd jumping to their feet with applause, each sold-out event. My doubles are replaced daily, but I'm the one getting the praise as their crushed body is swapped discreetly with my larger plexiglass box during a switching act that would make a master magician blush with envy. I am the infamous folding man, and if you resemble me and are in need of a quick paycheck, I am always hiring. The one and only Madison. It's just another night at the old Victorian Theater, where center stage stood Madison Carrington, a place where you would see her countless of other nights over the past 20 years. A grizzled veteran of the performing arts, she has graced the silver screen and Broadway with her talents and has delighted countless amounts of fans all over the world. But even with all her hard work and her continued success, she always comes back to where it all started for her and performs 2 shows a night for a 2-week period every January at the Old Victorian. Like clockwork, tickets sell out quickly on January 12th when her 2-week residency begins. The residents of Ravenswood Township never miss the opportunity to watch the local actress put on a performance of a lifetime, night in and night out. She's always generous with her time as well, always willing to sign an autograph or take a picture, even stop and have a quick conversation. There's nothing off limits with Madison. She grew up with most of these people after all, and she's genuinely the happiest when she returns home every year to perform for the local crowds. But this year, behind her wide and shimmering smile that greets the hometown fans, hides a dark and contentious private life that is getting worse and worse by the day. You see, Madison's career and day-to-day schedule is run by her husband, manager Charles Carrington, a man who has made quite a success of himself by riding her coattails. Charles not only manages his wife's career, but is known as one of the better managers on Broadway, having several of the top actors in his stable, and he's even branched out and produced a couple of hit Broadway shows recently, starring his wife, of course. But there's turmoil, lots of turmoil in this relationship. Charles has become more controlling of the roles Madison receives and plays, only picking roles of characters in advanced years like mothers and grandmotherly type of roles. He thinks Madison is getting too old to play the roles she once did, and is becoming disgusted with her, even though she is just as glamorous and as beautiful a starlet she has ever been. Another recent problem that has arisen between them is his purchasing of the old Victorian, where he wants to permanently have her act, while he focuses on the careers of some of his younger clients, such as the young up-and-coming actress he's having an affair with. Well, needless to say, Madison was getting fed up with her husband's antics, and at the end of her 2 weeks of performances at the Old Victorian, a big fight erupted between them, where she informed him that she would not be staying and performing there, that she had accepted a new starring role in an upcoming movie, and that she had learned of his affair with one of his new clients. He, of course, denied his extramarital affair, and as her manager demanded to see the script. She proceeded to tell him that she did not believe him and their long marriage was through, and then handed him the script and informed him that this was the last script of hers he would read, because she was starting a search for a new manager, then walked out the door and went back to her hotel room alone. Charles sat and stewed over the events that just took place. He then pulled out the script and began to read it. Her character was a drug-addicted actress who was a single mother and was abusive to her family and friends, then journeyed down the long road of recovery and turned her life around. He was furious after reading the script, thinking this was just the kind of role that would put her back on top, even possibly earning her an award or two. This was by far better than anything he'd gotten her over the past few years. 2 weeks passed, and he contacted Madison and asked to meet her about the script, and said he had an idea or two that he'd like to run past her. She agreed, and they met for lunch at a nearby cafe next to the theater. He told her that he knew things between them were over, and he'd like to end their partnership with a bang. He told her that this role was perfect for her, and it would put her back on top, and to prepare for this role, she should observe recovering addicts and mentally disturbed individuals in an asylum up in the hills that was run by his close friend, where she could crawl inside the minds of these patients and really develop her character undisturbed. She, of course, jumped at this chance because she was a method actor, and her style was widely known throughout the industry. Her style was very extreme. No matter what character she was playing, she became that character to a T, 100% committed, never deviating until the movie was done filming. After their lunch meeting was over, Charles told her that he would pick her up the next morning and take her up to the asylum so she could begin her research for the role. But when she arrived and met the head of the asylum, she was restrained by 2 orderlies and taken to her own room where she would be under constant supervision and observation while she got the treatment she needed for her mental exhaustion and drug addiction. You see, it was all a ruse, set up by Charles. Little did Madison know that the prior 2 weeks he had been going around telling family and friends in the industry that she had started spiraling out of control, becoming depressed of how her career was going, taking drugs, refusing to act on stage at the theater anymore, and becoming violent, causing harm to him, herself, and the people around her. The people he told believed every word, of course, because they did not know the problems in the marriage or that she had ended the relationship. She never had a chance to tell anyone, so he just came off as a poor, caring husband. You never should have done what you did. No one ever leaves Charles Carrington, you bitch, he said to her smugly through the opening of the door to her padded cell as he turned and walked away, leaving her to rot. She screamed and screamed, professing her saneness and soberness, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The head of the asylum was in on it. He knew damn well there was nothing wrong with Madison, so there she sat, vowing to take her revenge the first chance she got. A month later, with his wife now locked away and out of his hair, Charles began auditions at the Old Victorian Theater for her replacement, including the young actress he was having an affair with. A total of 4 women made the final cut, with the winner receiving Madison's starring role in the play at the theater and the upcoming role in the movie she was preparing for. They were all asked to return the following morning, where it would be determined who the winner was after multiple rigorous rounds of acting. Charles had been running late. He received a text message from the actress he was seeing that they were all at the theater waiting for him in the backstage dressing room. He rushed right over to the theater and went inside. But when he did, he thought it was quite strange that all of the lights were off, except for a lone spotlight shining on center stage. He shrugged his shoulders and flipped on the rest of the lights and headed towards the dressing room. He knocked on the door and opened it. "All right, girls, I hope you're all ready to begin." "Oh my Jesus!" he screamed in terror. All 4 girls were sitting at their makeup desks dead. One girl's throat was completely ripped out. Another had a fire axe driven into the top of her skull. Another was sitting there with her audition script shoved down her throat, while a tie around her head to keep it in place, and vomit dripping from the corners of her mouth. And the last girl, who was the one Charles was seeing, sat at her desk, eyes and tongue removed, her womanly parts torn out and scalped. Charles screamed and ran to his office and locked the door. He went and sat behind the desk and started to tremble. Just then the phone rang. He jumped and answered it. Charles started to mumble, not able to speak clearly from the shock. On the other end of the phone was his friend who ran the asylum. He proceeded to tell him Madison had escaped late last night. She had killed a nurse, stole her uniform and purse and keys to her car, and rode off into the night. Before Charles could try and summon enough strength to respond, the line went dead. Charles' heart sank into his stomach. Beads of sweat poured down his face. His body began to tremble and convulse uncontrollably. Then a whisper in his ear from a voice he had heard so many times before, whispering lovely things and sweet nothings. But that time had passed. It was Madison. She placed a knife to his throat and whispered, "I told you I'd have my revenge. You think you could replace me? There's only one Madison, Carrington, bitch. To be famous. Just a question. What would you do to be famous? Please, just answer honestly. If the opportunity comes up, the majority of you would block people in the hallway and postpone their auditions. Some of you would try to blackmail and ruin people's careers to advance your own. At any rate, those may be immoral, but they are not violent. They are not crimes. Well, aside from blackmail. People wouldn't harm others just to be noticed, right? Maybe, if you want to be the star enough to have your name on the billboard or poster, or have your picture on the front covers of magazines and newspapers, you'd do other stuff. You'd harm other human beings. You'd kill for your chance. You'd slash people's throats, burn them in their houses, strangle and smother them till they turn blue and start struggling. Then, you'd get rid of the bodies, either by burying them in the woods or running them through the wood chipper. Or, you'd leave them where they are, to rot. You'd probably do anything to have your moment, to be in the spotlight, to be famous, popular, well-liked, and noticed, to be on magazines, newspapers, television interviews, radio, and other mediums, to be a household name. Now, just answer the simple question, please. What would you do to be famous? My famous friend. My friend promised we'd get famous together. He lied. He had been going to casting tryouts behind my back. He tried to explain that he thought nothing would happen, but this was different. He got a call back. I brushed it off as no big deal. A callback meant a second audition, not "you're gonna be famous, guaranteed." Not yet, at least. The next week, he went for his second audition, and guess what? He got a callback again. Can you believe that? He knew I wouldn't like that. The entire time he told me about it, he didn't make eye contact with me even once. Not even once. He said she'd send him an email about what was to come. I couldn't just sit there and watch as my friend became famous by himself. No. Follow your dreams, right? 3 weeks later, I was with my friend once he got the email. It was extremely generic, from an email address of miscellaneous letters and numbers. All that was in the email was an address and the words, "See you soon," in black bold. He was excited, and I was too. Immediately, we drove 3 hours to the location provided in the email. The black sky made my adrenaline rush. Once we arrived, my friend frowned. It was a dilapidated warehouse in the middle of a rundown, deserted neighborhood. The windows were all busted, and the outside walls were cracked in several different places. The door was gone, and instead laid a white sheet covering the doorway. Inside, I could see an ominously small lit light barely illuminating the ground floor of the warehouse. I was actually pretty scared, and I wanted the best for my friend. I truly did. I wanted him to succeed. And so I eventually convinced that idiot that if he walked in that house, he'd be famous. And what do you know? He actually trusted me. As my friend hesitantly stepped inside, he didn't have any reaction time to the metal pan that collided with his head and cracked his skull. 2 weeks later, everything was better than I could have ever imagined. I got my big break. I wrote an article for the Michigan Times that received acclaim from everyone. It came from me finding a video online of a high school senior named Mark Gruben getting viciously tortured and stabbed. The video went viral, and Mark was famous. Instead of Mark being selfish and only receiving what he wanted, I came through for the both of us. Now, we're both famous, like we originally planned. I was grateful for his triumph, I really was. I thought that nothing was going to happen with his dream, but I was supportive anyway. Mark made a lot of stupid decisions, and I always corrected them, because that's what friends do. All the world's a stage. It's hard being an actor in Hollywood. The job never lets you go. Even time off doesn't count. Working out, interviews, charity events, paparazzi, preparing for the next audition, reshoots, and finally, back to working on months-long projects with hardly any sleep in between, just to have the cycle repeat itself again. Take this project I'm working on right now. It feels like it's been going on forever. I can't wait for it to finish. Besides, my co-lead is a big-time improviser, which I just can't stand. Usually, I can work with her, but sometimes it really throws me off. Line please, I say after yet again another improvisation. I'm sorry, what? My co-lead asks. I look out towards the crew. Line please, I shout. Honey, I think you need to sit down, my co-lead says as she pulls me down to the bed on set. Are you okay? What's going on? Line please, I shout to the crew. But all I get are empty eyes and camera lenses staring back at me. My sister was always a special one. My sister was always a special one. From the time we were kids, it was easy to see that everyone favored her. And why wouldn't they? She was pretty, with curly blonde hair and light blue eyes. She had a wicked sense of humor and could make anyone laugh. And everything seemed to come to her naturally, whether it was dancing, singing, acting, or drawing. I wasn't pretty. I had plain black hair that hung limply around my shoulders and the dullest brown eyes you've ever seen. Nobody understood my sense of humor, and I had to work twice as hard at everything as my sister, only for her to outshine me every single time. When we were in high school, our class decided to put on a play. Guess who they gave the leading role to? Meanwhile, I didn't even get a part. I was furious. It wasn't fair. Becoming an actress had been my dream ever since I was a little girl. My sister didn't even care about drama, but she just couldn't resist an opportunity to steal the spotlight from me. They say time heals all wounds, and I will say that's mostly true. It's been 2 months since that audition, and the rage I felt towards my sister that day no longer plagues my every waking hour. Thanks to that day, I've even been able to confirm, at least to myself, what I always knew deep down to be true. I played the part of the grieving sister perfectly these past 2 months. For someone who wasn't even considered for a part in the play, it's incredible how easy this all seems to come to me. My acting puts my sister's acting to shame. They say you always forgive, but you rarely forget. I've waited for an opportunity to prove to everyone that I should have been the one they were paying attention to for 15 years. I can feel my moment approaching. We're having a special gathering to honor my sister. It was organized by the school cheerleading team, which she was captain of. Everyone I need is here. This is my one chance. I can't afford to miss this shot. My parents don't suspect a thing, neither do my teachers, or the kids who called themselves my friends but never failed to choose my sister over me. And by the time they realize the truth, it will be too late. Much, much too late. The love interest. Landing a recurring role in The Young and the Restless was a dream come true for actress Tonya Kurtz, as well as the beginning of a living nightmare. Only days after her initial appearance on the show, she began noticing a man at too many places during her day for it to be a coincidence, and was concerned she had a stalker. The man looked to be in his mid-20s, her age, with intense dark eyes that seemed too wide open to be a natural expression. It was almost as if the stare was intended to frighten her. Was he just a star-fixated fan with too much time on his hands, or something else? People on the set were sympathetic, but couldn't offer much useful advice. That evening, as Tonya closed up her second-floor apartment before bed, she glanced out a front window and was startled to see the man standing across the street in the shadows just beyond the glow of the street lamp, staring up at her. This is too much, she thought to herself, and called 911. A half hour later, there was a knock at her door. Assuming it was the police, she rushed to answer it, but instinctively looked through the peephole. For an instant, she stared into the bulbous black eyes of her stalker, then yelped and jumped back. "Go away!" she screamed. "The police are on their way." Tonya barricaded herself in her bedroom and called the police again. 10 anxious minutes later, there were more knocks on her front door, but she could hear the police announcing themselves and sighed with relief. They hadn't seen anyone, but would patrol the area more often than usual throughout the evening. Tired and surly, Tonya walked through the backstage area of the set to make up the next morning. Candy had her sit in a chair and began transforming Tonya into her pampered rich girl character, Eve Corbett, while telling sleep-inducing stories of her love life. Candy was working on her closed eyes when Tonya heard the voice of one of the show's producers, Paul Conklin. "Tonya, I'd like you to meet our newest cast member and your new love interest on the show, Thomas Volker." Tonya opened her eyes and found herself staring at the smiling face of her stalker. "A pleasure to finally meet you," he said. America's Next Sweetheart. The glitz and glam of being on this game show has finally worn off. Weeks on the press junket, countless interviews, and handshakes, and baby holding all lead to this moment. This is the first time since I sent in that damn audition video that I feel fear and regret. One of the 6 of us has the $5 million in their box. The only 2 before me have already pulled their cord. Those damn table saws and flamethrower were hidden incredibly well. 25% odds aren't too bad, I guess. I really, really hope America loves me, or at least voted for the shotgun. A ballet to any other song. The first thing you have to understand is that Marie wanted to be a ballerina ever since she was a child. Not in the floaty kind of way that some kids want to be princesses or superheroes, but with a fierce determination. And her dad let her. though not for the usual reasons. None of that encouraging your kids bullshit. He just thought about the kind of money that prima ballerinas make and his stereotypes of people that watch ballet, and decided that was the life he wanted by proxy. So at the age of 8, she was signed up to classes. Marie was good at first and was praised for her moves and poses. Her dad started rubbing his grubby little hands together at the thought of the glory he'd seep from her. Then as she got older, shows became more important to her ballet teachers. At that point, she wasn't seen as being quite so good anymore. I went to classes with her for a while. When we were young teenagers, I looked ridiculous, but hey, people do odd things for love. Her turnout was excellent. Her arabesques were flawless, and her pirouettes were on point. Pardon the pun. But when the music started, she just couldn't quite follow along. I watched her audition for one of those little shows her classes ran, and every move was just slightly out of time. Her dad found out that she didn't get the part, and Marie made the mistake of trying to blame the music. Maybe if it had been a different song. He hit her hard, and I knew it wasn't the first time. Time goes by. Marie is working part-time around school to get money for the ballet classes her dad no longer pays for, but demands she excel at anyway. He's more of a bastard than ever. Still hits her and tells her the only dancer she'll ever be is at a seedy strip club. He says she's less than worthless. And me, I'm going to the gym and to martial art classes, trying to ensure nobody will ever put me through that bullshit. At this point in our story, she hates and loves ballet in equal measures. She practices every free moment she gets, but it's still not quite enough. It burns her up inside, and I just watch, seething. But tonight, we've hit upon a solution. Her dad never even saw it coming, never imagined a small girl like me would have what it takes to knock him down and tie him up. But he was slow, and while he was big, he was weak. I take some tools out, things I'll need to enact all of my vengeance I've dreamed of. His screams are such music, and Marie begins to dance. She's perfect. Her dancing, I could write fucking sonnets about it. All perfectly in time to this particular song. We're not done yet. This is only the intermission. Ballet performances can last for hours. The cursed chords of my Frankenstein Fender. My new guitar is a real monster. I have created a Frankenstein Fender Stratocaster. It took a long time to find all the pieces for it, but with a little help from my friend Fritz, they're finally assembled and I'm ready to rock. I strum a power chord. It blasts out into the room, filling the air with the spirits of rockers past. It's alive! The idea first came to me when I saw an advert for a guitarist from a local band who were on the rise. Bela Lugosi lives, were the coolest rockers around. I was determined to get the gig as their axeman. I aimed to impress them with my audition. I didn't want to be just another invisible man. I was going to need the most badass guitar ever. My buddy Fritz is the kind of guy who can find anything on eBay. He constantly gets terrifying good deals on all kinds of music gear. I told him my plan. Fritz, I said, I need you to scavenge the quiet places of the internet, the digital graveyards of forgotten traitors. I need you to bring me a fearsome fretboard that strikes fright into faint hearts, a whammy bar that will cause wild wonderment, and a volume dial that goes all the way up to 11. With a speech like that, all he could manage in reply was a hushed, "Yes, master." Fritz did not fail me. We assembled the greatest pile of parts ever to compose a guitar. We brought together Bowie's bridge, Prince's pickguard, and the guitar body of Bolin. When I played, I could feel the spirits of all those musicians course through me, guiding my actions. I played literally as a man possessed. The local bar, the Black Lagoon, was the venue for auditions. When it was my turn, I bounded up on stage, with my Frankenstein Fender Stratocaster in hand and the spirits of a dozen greats playing through me. Nothing could go wrong. Fritz grinned at me like a maniac from the front row. I introduced myself by my stage name. "I'm Wolfman, and I'm here to rock and roll." I start shredding, as I've never shredded before. A wild solo that would raise a mummy from its thousands of years of slumber. But something was wrong. Cruel, violent thoughts began to fill my mind. "Fritz, you fool! Whose headstock did you put on this guitar?" I growled at him as I played on. Cult leader, Charles Manson's master," he stuttered. I didn't want to become a murderous minion for Manson, but if I played on, his spirit would possess me, and that would be my fate. With lightning-fast speed, I smashed the Stratocaster down on the stage. Free of Manson's cursed mind, I doused it with lighter fluid and dropped a match. Even out of my hands, the guitar played on as it caught fire and burned. Children of the night, what music they make. Road to Joy. She cut off her nose. Modeling was her dream, but nobody had wanted a single picture of her. She stared into the mirror, wondering what was wrong with her, and she realized that she was bland. The thought struck her like a sledgehammer to the temple. Nobody wanted her because she didn't offer anything new. There was only one way to solve this, she realized, and the next day she'd gotten a nose piercing. She went for another modeling gig, and fortunately she got it. "I love your nose piercings," the man with the camera told her. It was all the confirmation she needed. She got her eyebrows pierced next, but that hadn't been enough. She got her tongue pierced and made sure to keep it out when she auditioned for the shoot. She didn't get into what she applied for, but got offered a gig at a more erotic shoot for a better prize. They took a single picture of her with her tongue out. She noticed that they took many different pictures of the other girls, and that irritated her. The one that got the most pictures was a girl without eyebrows. She realized that piercings wouldn't be enough. She had to be unique. She cut off her hair, all over her body. The next photo shoot, she was completely nude, and finally, the camera was on her. She loved the recognition, but it wasn't enough. She wanted more. In one session, she got the most obscene tattoos on her body: genitals, satanic images, mixtures of hands and legs, and eyes everywhere. Not an inch of her skin wasn't inked by the end. No matter where she went, everybody called her a freak. Her notoriety rose, but it wasn't enough for her. She wanted more. A thought popped up into her. She needed to lose her humanity. It was then she started cutting into her face. First she got rings in her cheeks. Next she gouged out her eyes. She just cut off her nose. She planned to get horns put on next. Then she'd get her arms and legs amputated. Finally, she'd replace the bone and skin around her head with glass. People called her mad, but they were wrong. She was truly, honestly happy, and there was nothing wrong with that. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel. Your generosity means the world to me. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness or Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank you all for your support, your kindness, and your encouragement. I appreciate it so very much. Until next time.